This is Dan McKim. I want to welcome to the show Nicodemus Christopher, really good friend of mine. Actually, Nicodemus, this sounds like deja vu. I think we've done this intro like 3 times.
We've done it once or twice.
Yeah. I'm honest with you. I'm just a dumb meathead thrower, so it means you got to record to actually for it to work. How it usually goes. But Nick is a good friend of mine. He is the director of sports reform and strength and conditioning for Mizzou men's basketball, University of Missouri. And man, we were talking about your wife. Your wife now is a much bigger sports fanatic than you are, even though you're the one in the industry. But she's been in the industry for a while too, right?
Yeah. So my wife, she graduated from UCLA, left UCLA. She went on to be a sports anchor and reporter. And she's been in that business probably for the last, I'd say 15. No, she's not. I dated her a little bit too much. Probably about the last. Probably about the last,
that part out.
Probably about the last 10 to 12 years, right? So, she played ball growing up. She was a huge sports fan. Her family are Raiders fans, so you can only imagine the sports tradition that they have in their family. But she loves sports, and obviously at UCLA with their journalism program and their communication program, that was a huge asset for her. So she went on to get in the business, and sports is life for her. She's I mean, I don't even, usually. I lose those arguments when it comes to sports in our home. So we don't have them as frequently because I pick my battles. Yeah. But yeah, she's a huge sports fan. She, like I was saying, she's a sports anchor and reporter. She just recently started her own podcast. So nice. Yeah, it's 24/7 for her with sports. Man. Yeah. Now,
she had you on the show yet? Or?
Not yet. She's upfront and transparent about the fact that I'm a better strength coach than I am at interviewing her or responding to the questions that she might pose regarding sports. So I let her do the interviews and the podcast, and I just support her.
It's good that she can help you out because I know you get flocked every game.
Nah.
Reporters just coming right at you.
All.
Right?
Shoot, I'm straight to the locker room to make sure the guys have their post game meal.
Man, and checking for injuries.
Man.
I see you, checking yourself for injuries. I've seen you on the sideline. What'd you say? A couple of broken suits here and there?
A couple pair of torn suit pants, ripped jackets, ripped button downs. So our dry cleaning and our tailoring bill is probably one of our more expensive bills nice. Over the course of the season. But yeah, it's crazy because my Fallon laughs about it and we laugh and joke about it, but in the moment I don't even recognize it. I think that's just a moment where all of the hard work, the long hours, the grinding and the pushing, you're seeing it come to fruition on the court. Mm-hmm. So it just comes out, and I don't let my suit stop me. So shameless plug, we need to get rid of suits on the sideline in college basketball. I want to know who started it, right? Like, I understand it's a profession, I understand it's a business, but like, why are we running and jumping up and down the sidelines in suits? It's true. So I don't know, we'll see.
I guess that's an old school mentality for it. But, so when we get, you see it on football, right? You see the get back coach and everybody's the sideline guy who's holding the coach back and who's yelling at everybody to get back. What's it like as a true energetic basketball strength coach on the sideline, on the bench?
You know what?
What's your role?
It's funny you asked it like that. What's my role? Because during my time at Tennessee, I was actually, I used to sit at the end of the bench. I think it was my first years when I sat at the end of the bench. And then Coach Martin had pulled me into his office. I think it was going into our second year at Tennessee. And he said, Nick, I want you to sit probably about 2 to 3 players down from the coaches. He's like, feed our guys. feed our guys during the game, feed them, right? So that's where you'll see me. I'm probably two or three players down from the rest of our coaching staff, and that's my role during the game. I'm not talking X's and O's. I'm talking encouragement. I'm feeding the guys positivity, helping them to stay focused on the game, keeping them lifted up, remaining optimistic. And sometimes if a guy needs some discipline, then I'm there for that too. But that's the main reason why I am the way that I am, and I sit where I sit, is just, in the words of Coach Martin, feed our guys.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. You see all the internet warriors and trolls out there that, I mean, honestly, they'll mock coaches, strength coaches, for things they do on the sideline. But you make a great point, right? You've got a role as a part of the team to help, right? And the coach puts roles out there for guys, but that's huge for you to lift guys up, to help them. Like, you even said discipline. That's something people don't even think about. That there's sometimes guys get in trouble, right?
Hold your head up, or if a coach says something to a player, or a player comes out the game and he has bad body language, hey, straighten that up, up. Let's go, man. We still got a game to play. Stay locked in on the task at hand. So that's a big part of it.
You and Coach Martin are really close, and I know that, and we'll get to some of that a little bit. But I just, while we're still on this topic, is how critical is that for you as a coach to know and be on the same wavelength as him, knowing this is what coach expects you on the court, off the court, whatever it is, this is what he expects, and I have to carry that out.
It's extremely important, because if you look at the schedule, the day-to-day schedule for a men's basketball head coach, coach rarely has a spare minute, right? And I learned early on that a part of my role is to make sure that he has less stuff on his plate and less stuff to worry about. Now, I think I have a unique role in that Coach Martin has me do things that sometimes a lot of strength and conditioning coaches might not do. But it started early on. For instance, if Coach Martin was going to a fundraiser or something like that, I get a call, Coach, get ready. We're about to head to this city for a fundraiser, and I was there to support him. So from the beginning of my career, I've always tried to be somebody who's behind the scenes supporting Coach Martin in whatever way that I can, whether it's in the weight room and outside the weight room. And in regards to the strength and conditioning aspect, it's Coach Martin should never have to worry about what's going on in our weight room, right? He should never have to stress or worry about the physical development of our guys. So that's something that I should completely take off of his plate. Now there should be constant and consistent communication between the strength coach and the head coach, but Coach Martin, I think I can speak for him when I say this. He's been vocal about the fact that he trusts me, and I have his full support.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool, man. So we got to roll this back a little bit. We got to see exactly how you started. I mean,
gotcha.
I was doing some research.
Yep.
I pulled up your high school transcripts. Okay, not really, not really that far. But you graduated high school age 16.
Yep.
Now, last I checked, dumb people don't do that. Nah. You got to be pretty smart to do that. How did that come about?
You know what? So I give all the credit to my parents for that. So my parents are both huge on education. My mother is a teacher by trade. So what actually happened is, my older brother, Gary Christopher, who's the director of strength and conditioning for the men's basketball team at University of Pittsburgh at Pitt.
Way older. He's way older.
Yeah,
he looks
11 months apart. Now, he's not older. He's way bigger. He's way bigger than I am. But and I don't know if he's stronger or faster. We'll get to that later.
Right.
He's bigger. He has the show muscle. But when my mother in pre-K and kindergarten, so my mother started teaching him. And just her being a teacher by trade, she's always felt like our education system, our school system here in America kind of sometimes put limits on what children can achieve. And she didn't want to put those limits on me. or any of my siblings for that matter. So what she did was, when she was teaching Gary, she made sure that I was present for those lessons. And when it was time for Gary to go to school, this particular school that our parents wanted him to go to, he had to test in, right? So when Gary went to test in, my parents asked the administrators if I could take the test with Gary, just to see what happens. And it was a blessing. Fortunately enough for me, I guess I passed the test. So Gary and I started off school, first grade together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, from my understanding, is Gary cheated off you on that first test, right?
We're gonna have to get Gary on this podcast.
Oh,
man. You're gonna have to ask him.
We can trash him. He's not here, right? No, that's
funny.
What was high school like? I mean, you went to, from other things that I've just read about you and know about you. I mean, you guys are super close, right?
Very.
But you're very competitive with each other,
Extremely.
as brothers are, right?
Exactly.
What was that like going through school with your brother? I mean, you're not twins, but you're in the same grade.
You know what? Gary and I, even to this day, we're extremely close. Part of it is because of some of the things that we had to go through growing up. We really had to rely and lean on each other in order to make it through that. But another part of it is we have 5 sisters, right? So there's 7 of us. So in a home with 5 sisters, we definitely have to support each other and make sure that we're there for each other and kind of be the getaway. The getaway.
You're always in trouble.
Else, right?
Like,
exactly.
If it's not mom and dad, it's your sisters.
For sure. But it was a good experience. Obviously, having my brother there, we played sports together, so we were on the same teams together, had a lot of the same classes together, and then fortunately went to Baylor University together. So, and that was actually the first time that Gary and I did not have classes together. I don't think we had one class together our whole time at Baylor. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Gary. Yeah, for sure.
What was you on a personal level?
Yep.
What was that like? Because we know how middle school and high school, especially dudes, can be. I mean, you're 16 graduating high school. You're 2 years, many times 2 years younger than everybody else, right? Yeah. What was that like? I mean, that's got to be an adjustment, right? I mean, that's a big difference.
It was, but again, it's different when you have a brother there with you, right? So we have a group of friends. We're very close, and people joke about it, but usually if you saw, it's 4 of us, myself, my brother, my close friend Curtis, he's actually a doctor in Houston, and then my other close friend Nathaniel, who was actually a lawyer in Houston. We all went to Baylor together, et cetera, but people joke and they clown and say, if you saw one of them, you saw the other 3, right? So leaning on those guys, leaning on my brother, that was huge in my huge part of my development, because as you stated, like you're 16, 17, 18, 19 on a college campus, right? So at a very young age, and my father was very much so, when you leave home, you can't come back, right? So he always taught us, I want you to be a man. I'm developing man, and a part of that is being able to go out there and fend for yourself, right? So we knew we had to depend on each other, because we couldn't go back home, and to be frank, our parents couldn't support us, right, because of how we grew up. So we knew, if this doesn't work, we're in trouble. Yeah.
One thing that's amazing, and we'll get to, you actually did go home, but it was under different circumstances to help your dad. But one thing you talked about earlier was just, you talked about that upbringing and your parents supporting you and everything. You actually lived in a mission.
Yes. Yeah. So
what is that?
Oh man, that goes far back, right? So my dad was involved in the streets and things early on in his life, and God radically transformed him. And once he gave his life over to God, he just decided that helping the less fortunate was his passion and was his purpose. And as a result of that, my parents ran an inner city ministry, right? So The main goal was to help the homeless and to help battered and abused mothers.
Yeah.
So a part of that is we actually lived in the mission, right? So the building where we served food out of, we provided clothing for them. We had church service. That's where we lived. And it's crazy because I remember when we first moved in, you're just talking about a normal building, right? There's no shower. You talk a typical. If you were to walk in a random building, you're not gonna have showers. You're gonna have a bathroom. There was a bathroom. They had to build out the kitchen to cook the food for the homeless. And it was actually classrooms that they converted to bedrooms for us to sleep in at night. And I remember when we first moved there, probably the first couple of months, the big trash cans that you push out to the driveway, that you throw your garbage in, that's what we would shower and bathe in, right? So my mom and dad would boil hot water, right? So you put the hot water in, you put the soap in, and you put the cold water in, make sure it's warm, and we would get in the trash cans and we would bathe in trash cans, right?
Wow.
So that's the life that we lived growing up. It was all about it's crazy because now looking back, it was just so normal to me, right? So
sure.
we're sitting on the street corner with the homeless. Like I remember one of the women who was closest to our family, her name was Peggy, right? She slept in a sleeping bag across from the Salvation Army. So we knew if you walked 2 blocks over, you would always see Peggy sleeping in a sleeping bag at night, right? So that's the type of relationship that we had with the homeless people that lived in the city. And then, it was a life of servanthood. I mean, whatever food was donated, and that my father and whoever, obviously you have volunteers who come through because it's a mission. So whoever came through and volunteered and helped us out, whatever we would cook for the homeless, that's what we ate, right? When people would donate clothes, from the homeless, my father would give the homeless their clothes, let them pick, and then whatever was left over, we would choose from, right? So,
wow.
I mean, we didn't grow up in designer clothing. I remember, I had to be 8, 9 years old. That's when Junior Seau was playing for the Chargers, and once a year he would have a free camp where kids from the inner city could come out, and my brother and I went out to the camp, and I remember we're out there in like uniform dress shoes, right? Because that's what we had. Wow. We didn't have sneakers. We didn't have any of that.
You're all about business, when you were there,
right? So I mean, that's just the life that we grew up in, and I'm thankful to God that we had that experience because it really molds you and shapes you and puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What from that time that you were there? What was the big takeaway for you? What was a big thing that happened there, or that you learned, or that you experienced, that helped form you into the man you are today?
I'd probably say in my opinion, there's no greater feeling. There's not many greater feelings than that of service, right? So you see a mother who was beaten. She has 2 kids. She doesn't have anywhere to go. And to watch the way my mother would nurture her and take care of her, and my father would make sure that her family was provided for and get back on their feet. There's not too many feelings like that, right? So that creates a passion for generosity and servanthood that I don't think that you can get from many other places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said, your dad came to know the Lord. God got a hold of his life.
Yeah.
Knowing you through the years that I have, I know your relationship with Jesus Christ is huge. Yes. It's paramount to you. Yeah. What is that? How did that formulate? How did you come to know the Lord, and how have you grown over the years of that?
I obviously with having the parents that I have, my mother and my father both being very God-fearing, I think your parents plant those seeds in you, right? And I'll say without a doubt that my parents planted those seeds in me. And obviously we make mistakes throughout life, right? You go through experiences and you learn, and sometimes you have to make those mistakes in order to learn. I think those are where some of your greatest lessons are learned, is through those tribulations and those struggles as a result of bad decisions. But because they planted that seed, it was always present in my life, right? In some form or fashion. But I think that as I got older, and as I matured, it's just I was always drawn to having a relationship with God. I was always drawn. It's funny because my father would always teach us, it's one thing to be religious and it's another thing to have a relationship. And as I got older, I realized that spending time with God in his presence, in prayer and in devotion, is the number one most important thing, right? So it's crazy because it's the more time I spend in devotion, the more time I spend in prayer and in the word, the more drawn to it I am, and the more when I get busy, or if I forget to get in my word or something, like, you recognize that something is missing.
Absolutely.
Because that's my power source for everything that I do, right? So it's like if I left the house without charging my phone, eventually the phone is going to die. And in my opinion, it's spending time in God's presence was what charges me up. So to answer the question, it's the seed that my parents laid in my life, and I was always drawn to having a relationship. And my name in and of itself, I think that was a part of it. It's Nicodemus, right? Yeah. It's a biblical name, and I was always drawn to the story about Nicodemus going to Jesus by night and saying, "How must you be born again?" Right. So my parents would tell stories about me being 4 years old, and we're in a restaurant or we're somewhere, and I'm standing up telling people, "You must be born again." Right? So awesome. maybe they were speaking for the calling over my life that I didn't know yet, but that's all. God has always been the central figure in my life.
Man, I can imagine him as a father beaming when he sees his son saying those things, man. Yeah. How do you work that in? I know that we aren't supposed to. I know that the collegiate realm is an interesting avenue sometimes when it comes to faith. How do you work that into your daily life? You know what? You're impacting everybody
by setting an example, right? So it's funny because it's a saying around the guys. Like if the guys were to come in here and it's their first time seeing me today, they'll ask me, "Coach Nick, did you feed your spirit today?" Right? That's awesome. And where that comes from is, just in joking and in playing and having conversations with the guys, I'm upfront and I'm honest with them, and I tell them there's a few things that I'm gonna do every single day, right? The first thing I'm gonna do when I wake up in the morning is I'm gonna feed my spirit, right? So that's prayer and devotion. That's every single day. As soon as I wake up, I have a routine where I spend time in prayer, and then I watch a devotion or read a devotion, and that's number one. So I tell them if I wake up, if God allows me to wake up, I'm going to feed my spirit, right? I'm going to love my wife. I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to take care of them, and I'm going to feed my body, right? Both physically, right? So that they'll walk in and they'll say, "Did you feed your spirit? Did you love your wife? You taking care of us? Did you work out yet?" Because I tell them I'm gonna feed my spirit. I'm gonna feed my mind. I'm gonna feed my body. I'm gonna love my wife, right? So, and they know a part of it. And when we're in the weight room, I'll throw little things at them when we're in the weight room. Feed your body. Feed your body. Feed your body. And that's a cliche for working out and eating the right things. But I think that's important. And I was just having a conversation with somebody probably 2 days ago, and they just asked me. They were just asking for advice, and I told them the best advice that I can give you getting in this profession or in coaching period is when you get your opportunity, don't let a day go by that you don't feed your spirit or feed your mind, right? Don't let a day go by. Before you leave the office, in some way, feed your spirit, and in some way feed your mind. And a part of feeding your mind is whatever your goal is, whatever career goal, whatever professional goal you have, you should be studying something to inch you closer to that goal, right? That's a choice you have to make. And it's actually, there's this a quote that I heard recently, probably about a few months ago, and it stuck with me. It said, I think it was Pastor Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church. I want to say it was him. It might have been somebody else, so don't quote me on that. But he said, it was Michael Todd, Pastor Michael Todd at Transformation Church. He said, don't turn things that should be disciplines into decisions, right? And I think that's where a lot of times you can take in any realm and in any area of our life, we turn things that should be disciplines into decisions, right? And waking up, spending time in my word, loving my wife, taking care of the athletes, professional development. At some point, they start off as decisions, they become disciplines, and disciplines become passions, right? But it just doesn't start off as a discipline. You have to make that choice. And once it becomes a discipline, don't let it go back to being a choice. This is who you are. This is the life that I live. And these are the things that if you come into contact with me, these are things that I'm going to do. Yeah. Right.
One of the things I appreciate about you, man, and I mean, you went from, let's see, you were at Baylor and then got your master's at UT Tyler.
Yep.
From APEC to Michael Johnson.
Yep.
Sports forums to Stanford to Purdue to Tennessee to Mizzou. You're impacting those around you, and you are a man of character and development beyond the weight room. How do you instill that? How do you do that? Because you have an awesome relationship with the guys that are under your care. How do you develop them, and how has that passion gone? So you're developing young men into men when they leave here.
Man, honestly, I'm learning more and more about that every day. And I'll say that's one of my greatest mistakes and my greatest lessons in this profession, because when I first got in, I thought that it was all about what's on that piece of paper, the exercise selection, the sets and the reps. But now that I've spent some time in this profession, and I like to think that I've matured some, I realize that developing them as men is so important. And part of that growth comes from Coach Martin, because he has two sayings. He says all the time, treat our guys like they're kings. Remember that they are somebody's son, and they will be somebody's husband and somebody's father.
Wow.
Right? So if you keep that in mind, right, this is going to be somebody's husband, and this is going to be somebody's father. What traits do you feel, or what attributes do you feel like these young men need to develop in order to be somebody's husband and somebody's father? Right. So that's some of the things that I focus on. And there's a multitude of different ways that I address it. I had one kid before where he just got here. He was struggling. He had a lot of stuff going on at home. And I had and it was difficult to reach him. He was closed off, and sometimes he would act out and he would do this and do that. So one day I saw him walking by the office, so I called him in. We're having a conversation. I knew he liked shoes, right? So I started a conversation about shoes, right? So I was like, so what's new? So I pull out my laptop. We go to the Nike website. So what's heat? What's the fire? What do you guys like? He's like, man, coach, those are cold, right? So on that at that instance, I bought the shoes for myself that he liked, right? Mm-hmm. So when those shoes got here, I had them on. I'm wearing them to the weight room. He's like, dang, coach, you the GOAT for that, right? But from that day, something as simple as having a conversation about sneakers, spending $180 on a pair of shoes, just to say I'm listening to you and I hear you, went so far. And I went so far with him, I never had an issue with that kid again. Wow. Because that created an entry to another dimension or another place with him. And I feel like That's one thing. It might sound weird, but I feel like part of our purpose as coaches is to be a door, right? And a door represents entries into new dimensions, entries into new places, entries into new things. So it's, what are we doing? How are we striving to give our players and give these young guys access into new dimensions that that otherwise they wouldn't have had access to?
Wow.
Right. So I think that's why, the every 4 years you can take an overseas trip. Everywhere I've been, Coach Martin has made sure that we take that overseas trip, because giving guys that perspective of going to another country, having to depend on each other in a foreign environment, seeing things like we have guys who, when we've had guys in the past where when they get their Pell Grant check or they get their scholarship check, they have to send home money to their parents to help provide.
Right.
So spending 13 days or 11 days, however long it is, in Italy was something that wasn't even on their radar, right? So to be able to experience 9, 10, 11, 12 days, however long it is, in another country, it's just like, wow. And I can speak for myself. I remember when it was our trip to Australia, I believe. Yeah, it was our trip to Australia. I'm just walking around in Australia, and I'm like, man, if you would have told me at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old that I'd be standing in Australia, I would have never thought, right? So even me as a young coach, what an awesome experience. So I know that it's an eye-opening experience for those guys too.
Yeah.
So giving these guys access to new doors and new dimensions that they otherwise wouldn't have had.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for 10 years now.
Yep.
I mean, at age 30, you'd already been at 3 big basketball programs. I mean, you've experienced
Tennessee, Cal, and Missouri.
Yeah.
All completely different experiences too. All completely different experiences. And it's crazy how each one builds on the next, and how I've learned a new lesson everywhere that I've been, right? Because just to be frank, there's a certain type of kid that you have to recruit to be able to play in the SEC, right? Yeah. There's a certain type of kid that you have to recruit to be able to play at Cal, right? And there's a certain type of kid that you have to recruit to play again at Mizzou in the SEC and be successful in the classroom too. So I've learned lessons from everywhere that I've been, and I continue to learn lessons daily.
Yeah. So what's changed for you over the years within? You talk about development, you talk about training, reps and sets. I mean, what's changed for you over the years?
Ooh, man, we're about to. I don't know if you really want to ask me that.
Loaded question.
So I say you can take even from the last summer, right, where the NCAA instituted the new rule where out of the 8 hours, coaches get 4 of those hours, and I think that in my opinion, in regards to the landscape of college basketball and college strength and conditioning, that was a landmark moment.
Yeah.
Right? Because in a sport with so many overuse injuries, in a sport where more is always the answer, and when I say more, I mean more time on the court, more games, more practices, more skill development workouts. What these guys really need is more physical development. And I was actually appalled. I was surprised that the NCAA allowed that rule to take place, and they're actually in talks. They were in talks to allow the coaches to have the discretion of all 8 hours, right?
Wow.
So imagine a time, and I can think back from when I first started at Tennessee. I had 8 hours to develop my guys during the summer, right? 8 hours a week to develop, and now I get 4 hours a week. Right, so what you did over let's just take last summer for example. What you did over the course of one summer is you doubled their workload on the court, because you went from 2 to 4. So you doubled the amount of time that they spend on the court, and you cut in about 1/3 the time that they have for physical development. And if you see, some of the kids who are walking on campuses all across America now, kids who are playing in well over, because I have a relative who is a top recruit in college basketball right now. And I'll take him for an example. As a sophomore in high school, he played in over 140 games.
Good night.
Right, so because you just have to keep it in perspective. He's a top 5 kid in his class, right? So if you're a top 20, top 50 kid, you're gonna start preseason conditioning in August, right? You're gonna play your season. If you're good, you're gonna make it to state. Once you finish with state, you probably have about 2 weeks, and then you start practicing for AAU basketball, right? Yeah. So now you're gonna play AAU basketball from like the second week of April all the way through, I think he stopped playing basketball in like the second week of August. Wow. And that's playing on these different circuits, playing AAU basketball. And on top of that, you're a top 25 kid, so you're playing in the Jordan Brand Classic. You're playing in the McDonald's All-American game. You're playing in the Slam tournament. You're playing in the Adidas tournament. You're playing in the Under Armour. You're playing in all these top tournaments on top of AAU basketball, right? So imagine doing that for 4 years. Think about it. The NBA plays, 80 games a year?
Yeah.
80-something games a year.
Your wife would know.
Yeah, she would. So in the NBA, you play 80-something games a year. In collegiate basketball, you hope to play probably around 30-something games a year. Yeah. Right? But we're allowing high school basketball players to play in over 100 games a year. Right? Man. And then you cut off the one time that you have 8 weeks to develop these guys, to work on physical development. Now you cut that. Yeah. Like what's really important? Mm-hmm. That's what you have to ask yourself. What's really important? Because if developing these guys fit, if you just want to, I don't know, we won't get into that, but how can you cut? And obviously I'm a strength and conditioning coach, so physical development is huge for me. But that's what these guys need. Right. That's what they need. They've overdone it their whole lives. They need structure. They need physical development. They need to be in the weight room. They need some of the fundamentals of movement. And because of the new rules, we're not allowed to give these guys that period of physical development that they need.
Right. And you think of, I know myself in high school, recovery was not on the radar. Yeah. So you have kids that are, like you said, are broken down, beat up. They're not recovered. I mean, how... I can only imagine how that would impact.
Yeah, and it's a struggle, and it's I think part of it is, sometimes the people who are on these boards who are making these decisions, they kind of have an old school mentality, but you got to think, probably not far removed, probably 10, 50, probably 15, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you didn't have summer workouts. Right? A lot of the guys who are coaching now, when the season was, when school ended, you went home for the summer. Right? So you had 8 weeks, 12 weeks to recover. Yeah. Obviously, you played pickup, you did, but having a skill development guy wasn't big then. Like every good player has a skill development guy now, right? Yeah. So it's like, you didn't do what these guys are doing. It's not the same. You went home for the summer, and then you came back in August. These guys are here year-round now. They need a break from. It's okay to get away from basketball. They can come in and get some shots, focus on physical development. Right. And I think, unfortunately, you look across the landscape of college basketball, there were a lot of teams that suffer from injuries this year. Mm-hmm. And it's the compounding of the workload. Too much of the wrong thing, right? Not enough of what they need. Man, and there's another saying. I have a lot of them, but I think sometimes in sports we have a tendency to be loyal to ineffectiveness, right? You have to be very cautious of being loyal to ineffectiveness. Just because it's what I did, what somebody else does, what's always been done, doesn't make it effective. So are you loyal to something because someone else is doing it because you've done it in the past, or is it effective? So don't be loyal to ineffective. Let's find out what's effective and pursue that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man. I'm coming up to kind of the close here, but I did want to ask you one last thing about your growing up. One thing you said is your dad said, hey, once you leave, you're not coming back. Yeah. But you did. After Baylor, you went back home, San Diego. Yeah. your dad had a stroke.
Yeah.
And you went back to help out. What was that like? What was that experience?
You know what? There's because of some of the experiences and some of the things that we had to go through growing up, and the sacrifices that I saw my parents make for us, that wasn't even a question, right? Yeah. So my dad, obviously, he had a stroke. So I, as you know, his son, I made the decision, and I don't even think it's not something that needs to be glorified. It's me doing my job as a son. Yeah. I went to University of Texas at Tyler, and helped support my mother and my father. Because I can go up story after story. Like I saw in high school, I saw my father pawn his ring to make sure that we were taken care of, to provide for the family. Wow. You can go as far back as when we were, Gary and I are 11 months apart, so I might have been 7, Gary might have been 8. And I can't believe I'm actually telling the story, but because of some of the stuff that my dad was involved in before, there was a retaliation from his past, right? So somebody came to our house and threw a Molotov cocktail bomb in our home to attack my father, right? So as a young kid, seeing my father grab everybody out of the house and suffered 3rd-degree burns on his legs to make sure that we were safe and sound, there's nothing I wouldn't do. That man sacrificed his life to get his family out of a burning home, right? So it's like the experiences and the things that I've seen. Like my mother is probably one of the, my mom is, when you talk about sacrifices, there is nothing that she would not do for her family. Yeah. Like I'm talking about what if it was the last piece of food, like there's nothing that my parents wouldn't do to make sure that we were taken care of. So after seeing all the sacrifices that my parents made for us, going back home to take care of my father and his illness wasn't a question. It wasn't an option. It's what I had to do. Right. It was so that's but you learn from it, you grow from it. You being there for your parents and those types of situations and having those experiences, and even being, so funny enough, if I had not gone to the University of Texas at Tyler, I wouldn't be here today, right? Because through going to the University of Texas at Tyler, I started interning at APEC, right, which is a private performance facility in Tyler, Texas, and Bobby Stroop does an amazing job, and he actually has other facilities now in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he's one of the top private facilities in my opinion. You'll see a lot of his guys at the NFL Combine. Patrick Mahomes is one of his guys. He goes back and trains with Bobby in the off season. But if I had not interned for Bobby and then started to work there, I would not have gotten the opportunity at Michael Johnson Performance Center, right? And then I left Michael Johnson Performance Center as an intern to go to another volunteer position at Stanford, right? And if I had not gone to Stanford, I wouldn't have met Dwayne Carlisle, who was the director of strength and conditioning for the 49ers at the time, right? So it's UT Tyler, APEC, Michael Johnson as an intern at Stanford. Once I got to Stanford, you know what the cost of living is like in California. So I was actually, I taught classes. I taught undergraduate classes while I was getting my master's to make sure that I had money. I actually took out, I don't have a problem saying I took out school loans and taught classes to make sure that we were good financially. So I had saved up a little bit of money, and that's what I lived. That's what I used to survive. That's what I lived off of when I was in Palo Alto, right? So I was paying like $650 a month. There was an elderly lady who rented out her home to Stanford students because she knew how expensive it was. So I'm paying $650 for the smallest little room in the corner of the basement of the house, and then eventually that money ran out. Yeah. So it was go home, but God opened up an opportunity. I actually got a call from Michael Johnson and Lance Walker, and they offered me a full-time position at Michael Johnson, right? So again, if I had not gone to UT Tyler, that opportunity didn't present itself. And then probably about a year, probably about actually 6 months later, I got the call from Dwayne Carlisle to come to Purdue for an assistant position. And then the rest was history from there because of my relationship with Coach Painter. He connected me with Coach Martin and then Tennessee, Cal, Mizzou. Yeah.
It's awesome, man.
All things work together.
Yeah.
They all come together. But it's crazy because you in the moment you don't see the connecting blocks, but if you look back. So I'm big on studying people who have achieved greatness or who I feel are achieving great things. One guy by the name of Virgil Abloh, right? He's a big-time creative designer now. He's actually the creative director for Louis Vuitton and some other places. I watched, he was doing an interview. It was at Yale, I think it was Yale or Harvard, and he said that one of the keys to his success or anybody's success, he said, find your through line. Right, so look over the course of your life, and what's that one thing that you can see traces of it throughout your life, right? And that kind of starts to lend towards what your purpose in life is. So from my experiences, from living in the mission to being a strength and conditioning coach, it's service, right? Being of assistance to others, right? So I think that every little thing builds upon each other, right? And you take, funny enough, so the only reason why I'm a strength coach is because of Gary, right? We went to Baylor. We decided when we went to Baylor, I was going to be an anesthesiologist and he was going to be a neurologist, right? We wanted to be doctors, right? So I think it was our sophomore year of college, because Gary had played a year of college basketball. He actually was at NAIA. He played college basketball. So I think going into our sophomore year at Baylor, Gary, he was spending time with the basketball players, stumbled upon the weight room, and I'm pretty sure it was Charlie Melton at the time, right, at Baylor. Right? Gary found a passion for strength and conditioning, right? And then he came to me going into summer of our sophomore year, going into our junior year, bro, I'm going to be a strength coach. Like, what?
That's part of the plan.
Hold on. You're going to be a what? I'm going to be a strength and conditioning coach. Bro, what's that? What are you talking about? You know how Pops always used to lift weights? Like, it's basically like that. We're going to train people. I'm going to train people. Me being the younger brother, even though it's 11 months apart, it's like, shoot, okay, I guess we're going to be a strength coach then, right? Because doctors, obviously, a part of being a doctor is being of service to other people, right? Being a strength and conditioning coach, and that's probably part of why my perspective is the way it is now, is this is just an avenue to serve others, right? That's what it's all about. But yeah, it's all connected, man. It's all connected. Find your through line.
Nice. Well, man, I want to bring this to a close. I want to respect your time. Cool. I like to always end my segments with what I call the 3-rep max. So these are 3 questions.
Got you.
Off the wall.
Yep.
Very, very telling to your personality, I'm sure.
Wow.
But I wanted to break them down. So question number 1.
Yep.
From San Diego.
Yep. Well, I consider myself from Texas, but we'll say from San, because when we moved to Texas when we were like 11 or 12. So I spent the rest of my life in Texas, but I'm technically from San Diego. You're right. Okay. So let's get it.
You're a
San Diego.
San Diego. That's a thing.
All right, so let's go. Being from San Diego,
would you swim with sharks?
Sure. Why not?
I mean, not in a cage. I mean, you just.
Oh, not in a cage? No chance. I'm good.
No chance.
I'm good. On the other end of a fishing rod. That's the closest I'm getting to.
Okay.
No.
I gotta agree with you on that one.
Okay.
All right. You're building a treehouse.
Yep.
How tall is it off the ground, and what's the one special feature in your treehouse that you have to have?
Let's go 12 feet off the ground.
Okay.
And it could disappear.
What?
Yeah. Why not? You need to get away sometimes.
It's true.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't understand the importance of getting away and taking time for ourselves. Easier said than done because I'm the worst at it, but it's a necessity.
Yeah.
Right. Taking time for your family, getting away, and decompressing is very important.
Absolutely. All right. Good stuff.
Yep.
Last question. We already know you're the smartest brother. Clearly.
Got you.
And as he would admit, probably the better looking one.
Yeah.
But
of course.
In a basketball game between you and Gary, because you guys are both basketball strength coaches, basketball game, 1-on-1, playing at 21 by ones and twos, who wins?
I spot him 11 and I win.
Oh, really?
Easy. Gary's too big. He can't move. He can't move. I'm the better athlete. I'm the better athlete. So Gary,
he played college basketball though. You said
he did, but that was before he was this big aesthetic figure.
Okay.
Right? He has aesthetics now. Right? It looks good.
He does,
but I move better.
Awesome.
So he's the bodybuilder. He's the bodybuilder. I'm the athlete. Yeah. Okay. It wouldn't even be close.
Spot him 11.
Spot him 11. To a game of 21, spot him 11. I spot him 11. Yeah, facts.
Awesome. Man, Nicodemus, dude, I appreciate you so much, man. I appreciate the man you are, the man of faith you are, fellow brother in Christ, and I consider you a great friend, man. So I really appreciate you jumping on this with me and having a good talk, buddy.
Man, I thank you for having me, for sure. I appreciate you coming down, and it's always refreshing to have you come into town, and sometimes we lift, sometimes we just talk shop, but you know, in the industry that we're in the industry that you're in, I think it's important to have people who are as authentic as you, right? And I think that's why we connected, and that's why I've always had a relationship, both personal and professional, with you over the years, is because of the authenticity of who you are and what you do. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, brother.
For sure.
Yeah, man.
All right.